Welcome to the ALIA Graphic podcast. Today, I'm really excited to have an awesome guest for a second time. I'm Georgi Urrutia, and I'm the convener of the ALIA Graphic Novels and Comics Group. This wonderful group of volunteers who love comics and libraries. But before we get started with our special guest, as a national group based across the land we call Australia, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land and acknowledge that sovereignty was never ceded. This was and will always be Aboriginal land. Me personally, I would like to acknowledge the Boonwurrung people of the Kulin Nation, who are the custodians of the land where I live, where I work, where I play, where I write, where I draw. And I thank them as well. And I pay respect to the elders past and present of all First Nation people across the land and thank them for the rich storytelling traditions and art. Now, today we've got Mike Barry, who is the creator of Action Tank. And if you haven't read it, you should. And if your kids haven't read it, they should. A junior graphic novel series that he self-published and was fully embraced, not just by the ALIA Graphic Committee on our notables, but also by the New South Wales Premier's Reading Challenge. He was also shortlisted for the Aurealis Awards. He was then published by Scout Comics in the US. And actually, it was included also in the American Library Association's Graphic Novels and Comics Roundtables Best Graphic Novels for Children reading list, which we should celebrate that because that is quite an accomplishment. And of course, it's also been recognized by the Comic Arts Awards of Australia. So, and all this from a self-published comic, which I think it's extraordinary and it's a beautiful story. Now, Mike has published Action Tank, Book 3, the epic conclusion to a young boy's journey home for dinner, and of course his mom's pasta carbonara. And we talked to Action Tank Prime. Welcome to the show, Mike, and congratulations on the third and final chapter.
Thank you, Yogi. It's so great to be here. And I really have appreciated your support over the years and your enthusiasm for the book and for comics in general.
Yes. Well, that's what we're all about. And we like to celebrate comics, of course, and we like to celebrate Australian comics and creators. And I think it's a beautiful story that, you know, like you self-published it. It was your first comic, as far as I know. Correct me if I'm wrong.
No, that's correct.
Yeah. And you know, it's beautifully designed and it became such a success story because, you know, like people embraced it, kids loved it. I still see it at the library going in and out all the time, you know. it's loved. And it's so good to see someone self-publishing it, having that success, being embraced by not just by us, but as I said, like the Premier's Reading Challenge, the Comic Arts Awards of Australia, you know, then getting that deal with Scout. So what was all that like, actually, like looking back?
Well, I mean, yeah, it's been one of the most fulfilling creative experiences of my life, I guess. You know, I like to say it's almost my greatest creation. I mean, I do have two boys, so I guess they're probably slightly ahead. But apart from that, you know, it's yeah, it means a lot to me because you know, I'd worked in corporate life, advertising and design and, you know, art direction, creative direction, all that stuff, you know, for years. And you know, telling marketing stories, advertising stories, that sort of thing. But I guess I'd always loved comics, just loved them so much. And it was weird that it didn't occur to me until kind of I turned about 30 that I could maybe make one. Like I'd actually accumulated the skills over the years to have a go at it. So I think I probably spent, when you say it's my first comic, it is my first, like, you know, real printed holding your hand comic. But I probably spent about 8 years experimenting with the form and making little web comics and all sorts of stuff like that before I decided to embark on this project. I had some long service leave at my advertising job, and I think my wife thought I was going to be, I don't know, fixing stuff around the house or whatever, but I just locked myself in the study for 3 months and actually made the first book. So I'd already written it over a year or so, but I actually just committed to drawing it in 3 months, and I almost got it drawn in that time. Um, yeah, and then had to sort of color it between the cracks of my job and that sort of thing. But I think overall, just I'm so happy I just kind of had the guts to go for it, and then also somehow managed to finish it, because that is the hardest part. Starting is not that easy, but it's a lot easier than finishing, is what I've worked out. So
Yeah, and I think that's very typical, and it happens a lot with creative types that we often have lots of ideas, and
yeah.
we start this and then we start that, and then we get distracted by this other story and this that, and yeah, it's really hard to be that disciplined and to say, you know what, I'm doing this one and I'm finishing it.
Well, yeah, that's it. The
And it's
start
really
is all
important.
excitement and hype and like, I can't believe it. And I'd lie in bed going, I can't believe I'm doing this. It's so exciting. And then months later, it's not about that anymore. It's about discipline. It's like, I must finish this.
Yeah, yeah,
And I
yeah,
think there's a sense of, like, for me, there was a sense of toiling in obscurity. Like nobody knew I was doing this. And that sort of was exciting to me, the idea that I could just suddenly reveal it. You know what I mean?
hmm
And yeah, I guess that's sort of a thing I've carried with me. Like no one expected, including myself, that I would actually finish a second book, let alone a third book. So, you got to find little mental tricks, I think, to keep yourself excited about it.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And do you have a background or an interesting graphic design? Because I feel like this book is so beautifully designed, like everything, the cover, all the inside pages and everything, and it just screams like graphic design to me.
Oh, thank you. Well, yeah, look, I was trained as a designer at university, and
Yeah.
then I started my work career as a designer. I think so I had a lot of skills in that area, I guess, that I'd built up.
Mhm.
But then, as I got more into advertising and that sort of thing, I think I got more excited by the storytelling aspects.
Mhm.
Um, so I then sort of developed extra skills, and I think then, when it came to putting the story together and actually putting the book together, I was sort of surprised myself, actually, how much design was playing a role in it. I'd always just thought it was more about drawing, but um, I sort of early on decided, particularly because it was a book for kids, I wanted it to be maybe potentially the first book they'd read on their own. Um, I really thought I want it to be manageable. You can open a comic sometimes and it's just word balloons everywhere, like massive, I wanted it to have room to breathe, right? So
Mhm.
negative space was just a key theme running through my head. So
Mhm.
like negative space, I mean like kind of open blank areas in some ways. And it's weird because what I realized by the time I'd finished the first book was that actually really helped to build mood and build a sense of place, because these giant empty spaces I could really then experiment with the color
Yeah,
and the emotion. Like it's
yeah,
just, these are things I had not thought about, like what you can
yeah,
use blank space for and what it can achieve in what is normally a very crowded page.
yeah,
So
yeah,
um, it's weird, as I got further into the story and more ambitious with what I was trying to do, it was harder to keep the negative space idea, but I didn't want to let it go. So
yeah,
that was one of the big challenges, was how do I, I wanted the story to gradually, a bit like Harry Potter or whatever, like the idea that you sort of grow up with the story. Each book gets a little more challenging and a little more
yes,
complex. But even though there was more going on in each book, I still wanted to retain that, like, very accessible, like almost simple visual.
yeah,
Yeah. So yeah, anyway, to answer your question, yes, design played a big role in
yeah.
and still does in everything I do, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it comes across, and I think it makes this book really distinct. And I think every page, it's beautiful how you use panels in very different ways. You use a lot of negative space, as you said, but also it also changes a lot the rhythm as well
Mhm.
of the reading. I think it's yeah. So in that sense, I like how you experimented with a lot of different things there. So
Oh yeah, look, I became obsessed with the rhythm actually of reading,
yeah,
and like I just wouldn't look at any page on its own. I would actually every time I'm reviewing anything, I just start from the beginning and just read it through, right? And just sort of where are the bumps? Where do you feel like you're slowing down too much, reading too much? Where does it feel like it's moving too fast? You know, this
yeah,
idea of like, yeah, this almost the momentum from start to finish.
yeah.
Um, and it's kind of, to me, it's almost like a song, right? Like
Hmm.
you listen to a song and you just know if something's out. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
That note's wrong, that's way too fast. That's, you know, and the rhythm of it to me is almost like music, I think.
yeah. That's awesome. That's really cool. Now, you said you've always loved comics,
Mm.
and obviously you experimented for a few years before, committing to this. But what do you love specifically about comics as a storytelling form or medium? What's what is it that calls you? Because it's a very different, it's a different kind of storytelling medium, and we know that a lot of people kind of, disregard it,
Mm.
uh, or they think it's just for silly stories or for children, and which is nothing wrong with that,
Mm.
you know. But um, I think it's a beautiful storytelling medium, and I really, really love it. But I want to hear also from different people what
Mm.
they think, and what is it that attracts you to it?
Oh, you know, it's fun because I've just loved comics my whole life, and for so long I just did not know why, really. And even when I started making them, I was like, you have a lot of time when you're sitting at the desk for weeks and months on end to think about these sort of things. So, I mean, I think there's a few angles on it. I mean, from a consumer point of view, like in terms of reading it, in terms of reading comics, at its most basic level, it's like image and text brought together to convey something else, like it's not just the text, it's not just the image. You bring them together and you actually get a third thing, right? Which is just magic. And then that happens every single panel, right? And then it's not just, to me, then it's not just about those moments. Like each panel is a moment, and it's not just about each moment. It's actually the momentum, like I said, between the panels, the relationship between the panels. So, the more, and the thing is, you don't have to really think about any of this, but when you start to make comics, you really do dig into, well, how far apart should my panels be and why?
Yeah,
And what does it make a difference? And, it does. And I think, I now read for the joy of the story, but I search out comics and graphic novels and stuff that I feel like this person has something new to contribute to the way this story is being told. So, um, and I think, yeah, particularly in recent years, I've really honed in on writer artists, like people who just do the whole thing themselves, because I guess that's
yeah,
kind of the role I've found myself in. And, I sort of try and look at their work and like, wow, why do I feel this after reading that page? Like, why? I feel it. I love it. Why? And, just trying to dig into how they've used there's very few elements. There's panels, there's spacing, there's, letters, there's colors, there's sort of some core elements, but those relationships, how you bring it together can change kind of the entire reading experience. So
yeah,
all of this, the more you dig into it, the more you realize how rich it is as a medium.
yeah,
Um, and yeah, I think in terms of making comics, yeah, I think it did dawn on me that I've actually accumulated all the skills I need to be able to do this. Like over years of working as a writer, as a colorist, as an art director, as a designer, and even I can actually pull the book together and publish it as well. And then I can market it. So there's sort of a
mm,
joy for me in that, that being able to see myself as a real artist,
yeah,
as like, this is completely from me, this thing. And
yeah,
I didn't realize how much that would mean to me until I started doing it. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, I think for me, a very similar thing in a way, and I'll put it in a nutshell, but kind of what you were saying, the artists actually, they put all that on the page, but it's still somewhat abstract. It's not it's not a photograph, it's not a movie, you know, it's not so realistic. You as a reader, you still need to decode all that and those drawings and the spaces between the panels and what happens and all that. And you make your own picture in your head. And the way I read it and the way someone else reads it, it's not going to be the same. And I love that. It's really intimate, it's really personal. And you, as a reader, you get given a lot, but you also need to put a lot into it, you know. And
Oh,
I
that's so
really
well
love
put.
that.
That is so true. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Anyway, uh, could you talk maybe about your relationship with libraries, both maybe as a patron, but
Mhm.
also as a professional, you know, like because I imagine that you've done now author talks and also workshops and things like that.
Yep.
Yeah,
Oh yeah, okay. I love
library
li
did you?
I love libraries, and you know I'm very lucky. I live in the Northern Beaches in Sydney, and we have this incredible library network here of like maybe 5 or 6 libraries that are all very close together, very connected. And you know, I mean, just from a graphic novel point of view, like the collection is so good, you know, and um,
Great to hear.
oh, it's so good. Like it's crazy good. And when I discovered it, I just could not believe it, you know. Um, and it wasn't that long ago I discovered it, to be honest. You know, it's just there's so much variety in there. So as a consumer, I love going to the library because I can basically bring away usually 10 that I've never read before. And like it's such a low risk, low stakes way to investigate a new author. You know what I mean? Like I haven't committed $50 to buy this thing. I'm borrowing it and I'm having a look at it and like, you know, then you can discover all sorts of stuff like that I never would have tried before. And so yeah, as a consumer, I'm really grateful for my library network. Um, I mean, I just love libraries generally. So the State Library in New South Wales, I've clocked so many hours in there writing and drawing. You know, it's such a great space to work. Um, yeah, so I love it. And the State Library in Victoria as well. I've done a lot of hours in that one as well, just, you
Hmm.
know, and I can actually think of specific pages in my books I've created in those libraries, which sort of means something to me for some reason.
Yeah.
Um, you know, I think I've felt a lot of support from my local library network as well. So, as you said, yeah, I've done a bunch of talks and quite a few making comic workshops in school holidays for kids, or
Hmm.
but not just that. I mean, there's the Northern Beaches Zine Fair is a annual occurrence, and that is a really good event. Um, it sort of reveals zines and self-published stuff to an audience that has never even thought about it before, right? So I've just met so many local people who've discovered my work through that. You know, I'm aware that I think like David and Ashley and all these guys from the local library team, you know, I think they're the ones that put me forward for the Premier's Reading Challenge. Um, you know, I think they've given me other opportunities too that I probably don't even know about because I know they're real advocates of my work, and I'm just so grateful for it. Um,
Awesome.
they selected me to be a judge of the young writers competition in our council area, which again was an incredible experience. You know, meeting all these young writers and just they're so talented. So yeah, I've got a real soft spot for libraries, and you know love taking my kids there, and we just come away with like 30 books each. It's just so exciting, you know.
That's awesome. Yeah, and that's one of the things that I always say to patrons. You know, I always try to put a book in their hands, and say like, you know, you can just try it.
Yep,
It doesn't cost you a thing. You know,
yep,
if you like it, great.
yep.
We've got the rest of the series. If you don't like it, great. Just return it, borrow something else. You know,
Well, and
like
also, I mean, as an author,
yeah,
you don't like, I didn't realize, but you know, when people borrow my books, the government does pay me for that at the end of the year, you know,
yes.
for which is an incredible service. I mean, I don't know if Australia is the only one that does that, but you know, it's sort of, yeah, it's very, very appreciated by a lot of authors that I know. So,
Yes, yeah, yeah, and I think that's sometimes not known enough
mm,
by some authors.
mm,
But yeah, I think that in Australia and definitely for comic creators,
Yeah,
if you manage to get your comics in libraries, that will help you because we know that comics, there's not much money in it. You do it for the love of it.
that's right.
Um, especially in this country. Now, I noticed that you decided to self-publish book three, uh, at least in Australia.
Mhm.
Uh, and obviously, you started self-publishing it. Is this a case of, I want to finish it and I want to finish it the way I started it and self-publishing this? Because Scout Comics did publish it in the US. So, what was the thought behind that?
Yeah, well, pretty much everything you've said there is correct. The whole point of the project was not just for me to write, but also for me to draw, and also for me to pull it together, and also for me to publish it, and also for me to learn how to market it, and just to, because I'd never done any of that before, and I just wanted to do it, right? So the whole point of the project from the beginning was basically that. Um, Now, the thing about, so yes, Scout Comics in the US, they are my international publisher, I guess. Um, they're still publishing the series. They've actually released book one already. Book two is due out at some point soon. Book three will be coming a bit later. We're sort of reformatting it for the US, so we make it smaller, like the sort of Dogman size or whatever. And I change all the mums to moms and that sort of that sort of
Yeah.
thing. Um, so, but they, look, um, to be honest, self-publishing to them is such a small scale, and yeah, I guess what I realized initially when I started, I just wanted to take over the world, right? I wanted this to be a global phenomenon, and I guess, look, I still do, right? But along the way, I sort of discovered the joy of, um, a hyper local focus, right? So even I even went through the process of, look, if every kid in my son's school bought a copy, I mean, that is thousands of copies, right? And then,
Mhm.
and then every kid in my local area, and then in my state, and then in my country, like these are things I can actually have quite a bit of control over because I can just choose to market hard at this group or go and do 10 talks here, or like I can actually kind of almost control my sales in that way, right?
Yeah.
Um, but also it's about unlocking new pockets of audience. And the fact that you know, I could actually meet almost everyone that's bought my book in Australia is like so exciting to me.
Mhm.
Um, and particularly with kids, like when a kid really latches onto a book, that book sort of becomes important to the whole family. I mean, I don't know if you've had that experience, but I have it again and again where I meet a young reader and then their whole family are like, see, it's like they know me already, or like I'm part of their
Yeah.
family or something. It's just such a privilege. So I just never wanted to lose that whole aspect. But yeah, look, I think in terms of, I make these books in the larger format, the original large format, and I love being able to hold it myself. I love, I've got about 1,000 in boxes behind me. I kind of
Yeah.
love the whole aspect to publishing as well. But what the Scout arrangement gives me is a chance to unlock that whole international audience that I can't really reach. So and the way that company works is, I mean, a lot of the stuff they published began as self-published or Kickstarter crowdfunded stuff. So when I started with them, I did talk about, look, are you all right if I continue to just have small self-published runs in Australia? And they're like, yeah, that's fine, because it's a way for me to actually generate the work and kind of fund it myself. And then any success I get with Scout is kind of just a bonus, I guess, for me.
So, yes, how did it happen? Did you reach out to Scout Comics or
Oh,
did
look,
you
I think I
pitch
was,
it to
yeah.
them? Or
I was reading some comic book news website one day or something, and I saw they'd started a line called Scoot, which was specifically for kids.
yeah,
And but there were kids lines popping up all over the place, I guess. But this was early on, and um, Richard Rivera, who was the guy whose vision it was to have the kids line, and I just emailed him directly and said, "Oh, sounds pretty cool. I mean, do you want to have a look at and I just sent him some, a little bit of a pitch thing about, I had the first two books completed at that point. So I could actually send him the whole two books in PDF. And so, yeah, they were very keen to make it happen. And so, it, it, uh, I've pitched other ideas and other books to other companies before and had all sorts of experiences, but I think this has been the easiest in terms of getting traction.
Yeah.
But then this is the thing, when you're working with a publisher, there's a lot more that's outside of my control. I'm used to being able to control it all. So it's sort of a different experience, you know what I mean?
When I was reading Action Tank,
Yeah.
I was at times seeing some superhero comics influence,
Hmm.
you know, uh, uh, but also maybe Transformers. I don't know, like what are the influences in this? What do you like? Do you like superhero comics? Do you like Transformers? What?
Yeah, look, I love all of that. I kind of grew up on Marvel comics, Asterix comics, and Tintin comics, right? So um, I think this is a bit of a mashup of all of those. But then there's also, when I conceived it, I was reading Dr. Seuss and stuff to my kids a lot, and really, when you read some of these books through once, you're like, cool. But then when you start to read Dr. Seuss like 10 nights in a row, it starts to seep into your brain like this guy is a genius. And like he's a wordsmith. He understands
Mm,
negative space, right? So he's got these crazy drawings, but like then there's huge blank spaces where the words can go. So I definitely think that was an influence too, because of who I was pitching it at. Um, and then, I mean, yeah, I've in terms of specific superhero comics, yes, I have some specific references. I mean, Stan Lee's Spider-Man, um, you know, I think I discovered that like 40 years after it was written, but I just found myself like going so deep into it because it's just so brilliant, right? About this
yeah,
guy who is so powerful but has the worst luck in the world and like, could destroy everyone if he wants, but actually just wants to be a nice guy. And like, it was so relatable. Um, I loved X-Men. I've actually, both my kids have their middle names, Xavier and Logan. So,
yeah. Yes.
got that one through with my wife's approval. So that was good. I love the dynamics between the Avengers. I've always loved that. I mean, I remember when I was a kid reading, I think it was Armor Wars, the Iron Man Armor Wars, where
Yeah.
Captain America and Iron Man sort of had a real falling out. And I was like, oh, this is awesome. And then, yeah, there's been plenty of others too. I mean, the Hawkeye by Matt Fraction and David Aja sort of set a new bar for me, I think, in terms of what you can do with superhero work.
Yeah.
And then the classic is what I would call the Frank Miller Batman trilogy,
Yeah.
which is Year One, Dark Knight Returns, and then Dark Knight Strikes Again. So to me, I mean, I don't know if not everyone loves all of those, but those three for me, if I could just read those three over and over again all the time for the rest of my life,
Mm.
and I would be so happy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
The really good ones, all of
yeah.
them. Really good ones.
Well, even
And
even even Dark Knight Strikes Again, which I think is less beloved, but I love it. Like I feel like he was responding to his own work. Like he's almost like
yes,
just brilliant, so brilliant.
I have to admit that I am a bit critical of that one. But at the same time, do love it. It's a love and hate relationship.
Yeah,
I,
yeah,
I do love aspects of it, but I'm
yeah,
critical with aspects of it. But
yeah. Well,
anyway,
that's all right.
yeah. But it's interesting that you mentioned Hawkeye as well because that book was also beautifully designed as
Oh,
well.
absolutely. I mean,
You know,
that's
yeah,
that
visually it
guy
was
is a
really,
genius. Like he is a genius. I mean, he basically weaves infographics with like, yeah, full-on graphic design, beautiful hand drawn. I mean, just yeah, immaculate product.
yeah, yeah. It is amazing. Yeah. Yeah, and I really like in Action Tank the other thing that you've done that I really like as well, and I can see how kids would really love and get into that.
Yeah.
It's like all the different levels
Yeah.
of the Action Tank and the little information bits that you put in there, and yeah, I could see that. Okay, this will appeal to kids that
Yeah.
age, definitely. That's really cool.
Well, yeah,
Now,
I mean, a lot of that comes from, I think, video game theory,
yeah,
not so much these days, maybe, but when I was younger, it was a lot more about leveling up. It was a lot
mhm,
more about, what does it take to earn the level? What does that unlock for you? All of that stuff, which is actually core storytelling stuff as well. Like it's
yeah,
and look, I think with Action Tank as well, I was trying to I was trying to create a book that would exploit what I'm good at and would mean I didn't have to do what I wasn't good at, right? So yeah, so I was basically like, oh, I like writing in a bombastic style sometimes. I like having different tones of voice. I like sort of, really fast to read and then coming to much more dense stuff. And, yeah. So everything that's in there is like something I think I could do well. And I didn't do anything that I didn't think I could do well.
Yeah. Look, and I think it comes across. It's a book that you can tell, okay, this guy is having fun, and it's,
Mm.
and no one's telling you, or you're not thinking, oh, this is the way I should do it, or, because of that. You're doing it for the fun of it because,
Yeah.
you believe in that project, and you're free to do it,
Yeah,
and
that's true. Yeah.
it comes across, I think. Yeah.
Oh,
Now,
thank
the
you.
trilogy is done and dusted. Uh,
Yes.
Celebration time.
Yes,
It's
absolutely.
water, by the way. But do you see yourself coming back to this universe again, or is it like I have so many other ideas that I want to explore now?
It's both. I mean, I do have a lot more things that I've been bubbling on for a few years, I suppose. But having said that, yeah, I guess the action tank universe is ended up being kind of richer than I probably thought it would. I grew attached to even the smaller characters, even the sub characters, sort of in my head, over time I started to build like histories and potential directions for them. And not to spoil the trilogy or anything, but I think there's certainly some possibility for further stories. I think it was important to me though to conclude the core action tank story. Like I just
Yeah.
yeah, I just felt like I need to find a set and when I think about it, like each of the books was a different challenge for me. I had a different focus. Book one was like, can I even do it? Can I even make a book that
Yeah.
works? And um, because obviously I had the longer story in mind, but at some point I was like, I think if I stop it here, that'll be a satisfying read, right? And if I never make another one, then it'll still be a satisfying read. And so that's what I went for with book one. Can I do it? And yes, wow, I did do it. Great. So then book two, I was like, well, I don't just want to do the same thing. Book two, I challenged myself more to dig into the characters and sort of make the relationships a little richer in the hope of somehow eliciting an emotional response from the reader. Because, like,
Yeah.
I love books where I really feel something, and so I was
Mhm.
like really trying to push myself. Can I do that? Can I create a book that will actually make someone feel something? Um, and then the third book to me was about, look, I've sort of I want to capture the scale of the idea, which is like galactic, like it's intergalactic in its breadth, right? But at the same time, I still want it to feel like a small story. It's a galaxy spanning story
Yeah.
about getting home for dinner. It's like a massive idea in a tiny story. And so it was sort of the challenge was how do I convey the scale of this, but keep it intimate, and keep
Yeah.
it so, I really wrestled with that for a long time because there's a lot more I could have put in there. But in the end, I guess, maybe I can tell those stories at some other point. Yeah.
So how good are you cooking pasta carbonara?
I don't know if I've ever successfully done it, but my wife is really good at it. And, yeah, back when I was thinking of the book, I mean, she kind of introduced me to carbonara, really. I didn't really know what it was, but like, and the
Yeah.
way she makes it is so simple, and it was important to me to, at some point, bring that recipe into the book. So anyone who's read it will see there is a
Yeah.
recipe in there somewhere. So
Yes. Yeah.
because my
Yeah.
kids
Yeah.
loved it too, and I was like, this is such a real thing. I want to bring it in.
It is a little bit magical, actually, that dish, because it's a pretty simple one, but
Yep.
it is quite tasty. I like it. Although, me personally, I'm always more of a rice person, so
Gotcha.
you
Okay.
know, so maybe for the next action tank, it can be, going
Curry and
home
rice.
to fried rice or something like
Fried rice. Sounds good.
that. Yeah. Um, Now, you also collaborated with Nat on with Run Tomorrow.
Yep. We run tomorrow.
Uh,
Yes.
yeah, which is a bit of a hybrid.
Mhm.
Um, uh, So how did that come about, and what was it like working on that book?
Oh, that was a really great experience. One of the things about creating Action Tank, the first book in Action Tank, it gave me a whole bunch of like it sort of was my gateway into the publishing world, into the comics world. It was like a portfolio piece really, where I could basically rock up to any event or any group, and I've got sort of some runs on the board, right? And so one of the things was it earned me like a scholarship mentorship thing with the Children's Book Council of Australia, where they sent me to Melbourne for 2 weeks. I went to the Melbourne Writers Festival with 4 other writers from around Australia, and one of those was Nat. And so we actually spent 2 weeks together, hanging out. And the great thing about being with other writers is they want to talk about writing. No one else in my life wants to talk about it in the depth that I do. So, I mean, it was just the best 2 weeks. And it turns out Nat lives 4 kilometers from where I live in Sydney. So we became really good friends. And even that was back in 2018, and we started just dreaming about the idea of working together. She had an idea about 4 kids who are obsessed with a comic book series about 4 superheroes. And so they were like a little gang, and the superhero group was like a gang. And, so this idea of telling parallel stories.
Yeah.
And so then I think when she read Action Tank, she realized she wouldn't just she may actually be able to find a way to bring the comic to life in the book. And so, several years later, I actually got a call from Penguin, who are her publisher, and they said, they sort of said, "Hey, we've got this project. It's a novel, but it's got 8 graphic novel sections within it. Are you interested in putting those together?" And it's with Nat, and I was like, "Oh, that sounds amazing." So, and she's one of my best friends. She's an amazing collaborator. Um, you know, Great sense of humor, just very talented writer. So it's like it was a dream scenario really. And after doing all my self-publishing work, it was such a cool, unique experience to work with Penguin, who are obviously quite a big publishing place. They got a big distribution network. So where self-publishing is kind of about it's kind of about almost being able to know every single person who can buy the book. Working with someone like Penguin is about scale, and it's about how many copies can you get out there, So it was great for me to have those dueling publishing experiences. I think I learned a lot from working with them. Yeah.
Yeah. I've heard from the bits and pieces that I saw online and on social media, it was clear that you two were really having fun of
Oh,
promoting that
absolutely.
book. So,
yeah. It's like after working corporate life for so long and never really thinking this could be a reality, for it to actually be reality is I mean, it's just never stop loving it. You know what I mean? I just never stop loving it. And so the chance to do it with someone else, because, I'm not complaining at all, but it's a reasonably solitary experience making something like Action Tank, and I don't mind that, but it was really nice to have a collaborative experience and also creating a product that we love, So, it was a lot of fun, and hopefully, obviously that did come through.
It did come through, and I think it came through with the book as well, that you two were having fun. And obviously you worked really well together. So that's cool. And Penguin, being a big publisher, is starting to look into Australian comics as well. So hopefully, they publish more Australian comics.
Yes, I hope so. I hope so.
Maybe
I mean,
you can
look,
publish your next graphic novel with them.
well, you never know, I guess. I do remember showing them Action Tank, a self-published version of Action Tank back in 2018 when I was on that publishing scholarship. And we went to all the publishers in Melbourne. We went around each of the offices and we had 2 hours with each of them. And I pulled out the book and I showed them, and they were just like, "How would we do this?" And whereas they've come so far now, obviously, but it was interesting to see. It's interesting to see how those big publishing places are starting to think about the realities of making graphic novels and how popular they are with kids. And, but also I think there's an appreciation for what it takes to make them. It's just a massive amount of work. It's massive.
Yeah.
And I think, they're starting to appreciate what it takes. Yeah.
It is quite different to publish a graphic novel, but yeah, I think that they've seen how popular they are,
Mm.
and in the last few years, it's grown so much, and it's interesting to see new publishers coming out,
Yep,
publishing graphic novels by Australian creators here, and hopefully that keeps growing. Yeah,
absolutely.
because for a long time it was only Allen and Unwin.
Yep, yep,
So yeah,
yep.
it's really cool. Now, we could probably go on forever, but at the end, as you know, we always ask, for recommendations,
Yep.
for readings. So, um, what do you have for us today?
Okay. Well, I'll just talk to you about three recent reads that I've had. So the first one is called 8 Billion Genies. I don't know if you've heard of that one. It's by a couple of guys from the States, Charles Soule and Ryan Brownie, I think. Um, and what I love about that, so I got it from the library. Thank you. Love the library. Um, it was 8 chapters, so it's one whole story in one book. And it's about the idea that on one day, Genie Day, I think it's called, every single person in the world gets a genie, right? And they get one wish. And so um, it's just that simple premise just spins an entire, like the entire world changes. And again, that's like that is a massive story, but I really loved the way they were able to make it kind of intimate, you know?
Yeah.
So really, that was very clever, that one. When I was at Supernova Sydney recently, I met an Aussie guy called Michael Busuttil, I think, who is a editor and designer of a series called Radiant Black, which comes out from Image. And so I bought 2 copies from him, volume 1 and volume 2, and that's kind of they've created a new superhero universe within Image there. And it was pretty well executed. I don't know if I thought it would be as good as it was, but it was pretty good. And I guess this guy Michael is obviously has a design background a bit like me, and it's amazing how much that maybe like you're saying, I could just see the design influence through the entire book, like it actually held the whole thing together.
Mm,
So yeah, really thought that was worth a
that's
look.
cool.
And then I'm gonna. This probably doesn't need any help from me in terms of promotion, but the Cat Kid Comic Club by Dav
Yeah.
Pilkey. Um, I grew to love Dogman after thinking it was moronic originally. I think I missed the point, but I but I soon realized it's actually genius. And then to spin off Cat Kid Comic Club out of it, and the wild creativity in those books, and in terms of not just understanding the comic format, but knowing how to push it, but still make it so accessible for kids, and just everyone that reads that goes and makes comics, including my own kids, and I'm like this is just this is a masterpiece, So and I find it quite fun to read, to be honest.
Yeah.
It's not speaking down to the audience at all, and that's I could sit there and read them over and over. I just think that guy is a genius.
Yeah. Yeah. Look, when the first one came out, I read it, and as soon as I finished it, I thought, this is a masterpiece.
Yep.
This guy is gonna change things
Oh,
just
mate.
with this book. And exactly what you said. I know of kids who've
Yep.
read it, and then immediately after they've made their first comic.
Yeah.
And that just blows my mind. The
Yeah.
power of that is
Yeah.
just amazing. Yeah, because as you say, like when they're reading it, they're having fun because
Yeah.
it's got all the little jokes and all that, and all the characters that they know. But then at the same time, it's actually teaching them how to make comics in a
Oh,
really fun way. And at the same time, it's actually showing them little examples in different styles. And they think, oh, I can do that,
oh,
and they have a go.
yeah.
And it's just amazing. Yeah, it is beautiful. Yeah.
And like if that guy is so successful, if ever there was a guy who could just phone it in, it's him, right? But he's not phoning it in at all. He's got this guy's got endless creativity, and just really understands his audience. So yeah, I'm very inspired by it.
Yeah, yeah. And one to look forward to next year. They
Mhm.
announced it recently. Uh, Scott McCloud
Oh, yes.
and Reina Togemaya are
Unbelievable.
joining forces.
What?
I mean, all right. Yeah. And again, it's kind of, making comics kind of thing. It's a little bit of a
Yeah.
similar idea to that. So
That's like
that's
Batman and
going to be
Superman. It's
really
like Batman and
interesting.
Superman getting together, isn't it? It's ridiculous.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. Yeah. Yeah. So that's going to be a really interesting one. As soon as I saw the announcement, I was so excited to see
Yeah.
what they do.
Yeah.
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 Cool. Look, thank you so much for joining me today and for this conversation. It's always great talking to you. And I hope that people pick up Action Tank. Now you have the whole story, start to end, have
Thank you.
fun.
Thank you. Well, yeah, and look, in the end, I knew I had to finish it because I wanted to have a box set, So now I got a box made. So now I've got the box set. It's like I could technically die happy, but I've got to make more comics. But I just I had to have that in my dream bucket list, and I managed to get it done. So yeah, if nothing else, I've achieved that and I feel good about it.
Excellent. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Yogi.